Great. And Dan is going to kick us off with the first part of our community update.
Cool. So I've got a fun job, which is to start things off, we wanted to just have a, before we get into some of the big questions, take a minute to take a look back for a few months because it's been busy and we've done a lot, and we just wanted to celebrate that. So first one, Mark. So obviously FIST happened and it was great. So the first one in 3 years. We had over 2,000 people attend, 31 shows, 185 people. Oh Lord.
Sorry about that.
And so this was in no small part thanks to our core of volunteers, the front of house people, the booth, the ushers, and the people who signed up to host. And a huge thank you, congratulations, recognition to Jordana. Also, this was a big feat, especially because we desperately are missing our production manager, Ray Simeon, right now. I don't know, for those who don't know, he moved to LA several months ago. So we don't have somebody to do that, so it's kind of fallen on Mark and Jordana to do things like moving boxes, figuring out lights, and so it's a big lift. So thank Jordana and Mark for letting all that happen. Next one. We also did our first big production of a director's series show, which it was Your Town, directed by Matt Strout and Bill Nelson. We overcame a scheduling delay thanks to Omicron, and we ended up having 8 successful shows. If you haven't read the feature in DCist, it was a really excellent feature, and it is really worth reading. So DC Metro Theater Arts also gave it a rave review. Next one. Other things to celebrate. So we just had a successful run with 10 special guests for the People of the District series. We are going to be bringing back Herald Night next week, so get ready for it. Mark will be able to tell more, but we have 3 teams returning, made up of folks who were part of the pre-pandemic program, and so that will be free. We will be ticketing, so you will want to sign up online. That will be live this week. There will still, we know that there's a culture of dropping in. But the registering will make things easier for us logistically. Ensembles are rebuilding. iMusical, Hellcat, and Scene Heavy Rotation have all added people. And if you haven't seen the item, Uncle Gorgeous and Madeline are auditioning soon. And Jordana has assembled a Improv-a-Palooza planning committee. So that is underway too. We are going to cap off our time at Source with Improv-a-Palooza. We've had a lot of work has been, a lot of less visible work to folks has been in the classes program. We have had over 600 students and in the core curriculum, and over 120 elective students, and we've been doing this since the Central NEA partnership has not been. We have not been able to restart that for a variety of reasons. So we're using all sorts of spaces, DC Art Center, Source, Atlas Performing Arts Center, and then the Universalist National Memorial Church.
One clarification for those of you who maybe don't know it intuitively, when we talk about a fiscal year like FY22, that's starting in July 1 of the previous year and going through June 30th of 2022.
And finally, we launched the ward-wide tour in May, and we programmed improv for all workshops in all 8 wards. 94 folks participated. And also, this is just a few of our community projects that we've kept going. We don't really get a chance to talk about this stuff too often, unless it's in an annual report, etc. But Project Create, we just wrapped our first round of classes there, taught by Crystal Ramsor and Clyde Thompson. These were free for residents of Wards 7 and 8 and supported by our National Endowment for the Arts grant. Jack Novak has been working with kids. Project Create is primarily a youth facility. And so he's been doing work with them for their after school program. Samantha Watson has been working with Calvary Women's Services. That's a nonprofit that works with women experiencing homelessness. We started that several years ago with Crystal at the helm, and Samantha has taken that up, and we've really increased our footprint there. Samantha has been an all-star in doing a lot of this community work. She's also been working with Armed Services Arts Partnership and Marie Reed Elementary. Marie Reed is one of our longest community relationships. Jack has taught there for a long time, and Samantha's taken over for that. And I think that is my bit.
Awesome.
I'm going to disappear for a little bit, but
okay.
I'll be here.
There is actually one more thing to celebrate. And that is the people involved on the staff and on WIT's board. We essentially made it through COVID without losing anyone due to COVID. Dan mentioned that Ray left for a job in LA, and of course, those of you who knew Jonathan Murphy, our education director, know that he left for a job with the city. But those were just like people moving on to new steps in their career. That wasn't like, sorry, we have to let you go because of COVID. Early on in the pandemic, the staff agreed unanimously to take a 20% furlough just because we were really uncertain whether there was going to be any support. And we wanted to make sure that the cash that we had in our accounts could last as long as possible. We were then later able to repay staff that 20% furlough that they had taken out of support that we got. And that's city and federal support, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. But there are not a lot of organizations in the arts that can say that they retained everyone on their staff through COVID. So I feel very fortunate that we were able to do that. And very fortunate that everyone chose to stay around, even though there was some uncertainty there, and it certainly would have been understandable for folks to explore other avenues. The other thing that has been a huge success during COVID is our board recruitment, which I was frankly very worried about when this started, because without actually doing live in-person programming the same way that we usually do, I thought it was going to be very challenging to sort of persuade people and let them understand the real magic that happens like in our classes and on stage. And in fact, that did not prove to be the case. And a lot of wonderful people have leaned in to supporting the organization and bring their leadership and their networks. So I'm super excited that this year we had 7 new board members join several returning members as well. So our board has actually grown to 25 members, which is the largest it's ever been. And that is all, think of that as 25 people who are deeply invested in the success of this organization and will do whatever they can financially or with their networks and with their expertise to help this group succeed. And, you know, the environment right now for an arts organization remains very challenging. And so having that expertise on our side gives me a lot of confidence in the way we're going. Back to finances, there are two main points, right? One I just sort of skirted around is we got through this financially, largely due to contributed revenue. And that's individual donations, but also city support and federal grants and forgivable loans. The other thing to note is that our earned revenue, which previously was our bread and butter, probably around 75% of our total revenue was usually earned. And when I say earned revenue, I'm talking about basically things that we charge for, right? So our classes tuition, our ticket sales, concessions sales, and the service fees for our professional development workshops through WIT at Work. All of that is earned revenue, right? We did something to earn the money, so we got it. Versus contributed revenue, which is individual donations, grants, and some corporate support as well. That relationship sort of flipped. What used to be our bread and butter was earned revenue. During COVID, that switched. And we'll talk a little bit more in detail right now. So here's the last 6 years. If you look at the blue line, you'll see just our total income. And as you would expect, FY20 is the year that COVID really started. And then FY21 was really hit hard. And you can see our total income, which had been going up steadily each year, took a dive. This year so far, it has climbed back. But if you look down at the contributed income and the earned income bars, you'll see the story. So this pink or purplish color is the earned income, and you see it really died off in FY20 and then FY21. Meanwhile, the light green contributed income jumped up to make up the difference. So you see those relationships sort of, they sort of crossed axes. And now if you look at FY22 to date, the total contributed income is roughly twice the size of our earned income, which is exactly the opposite of the relationship if you look back a few years. If you want to look at net expenses, right? That's basically the difference at the end of the year between what you brought in and what you had to spend out. And you'll see that on paper, if you look at the last 6 years, consistently, we have ended the year in the black, which means we brought in more money than we had to spend on expenses. And in fact, FY22 to date, that's what that TD is down here in the lower right, looks like, oh my goodness, we have made a killing this year. How did we do it? We brought in a lot of revenue and our expenses have been the lowest to date. But when you look a little bit closer, you see what's really happening. This is all due to COVID support. So if we look at that same span of time and we take out the monies that we received through those grants from the city and the Small Business Association, and you take out the the shuttered venue operators grant that we got also from the Small Business Association, then you'd see that starting at FY20 and definitely continuing in FY21, our net ordinary income would have been negative, right? Our expenses were greater than our revenue for those years. And so we would have ended those years, as they say, in the red, right, in debt. These programs, all told so far, have granted almost $1 million to Washington Improv Theater. The numbers here on the slide, $958,000. These programs were designed to do exactly this. They were designed to help city nonprofits or arts nonprofits nationwide endure this pandemic, because there was early on acute awareness that any organization that really relies upon convening people in person for an intimate experience, the way a theater does, is going to be deeply at risk. So this is a huge success of really thoughtful grant funding and thoughtful public support. And I would say that going forward, we are continuing to build back that earned revenue. So the money that we have set aside in our accounts right now, we will still be spending through, because it, unfortunately, as probably all of you are aware, like, the experience has not been that we simply snap our fingers and now everything is back to the way it was. Audience uncertainty, student uncertainty, the COVID social spread going up and down and up and down again and again. These are all factors that have played into how rapidly we are ever going to be able to get back to the activity levels and the revenue levels that we were at before. So the next topic is space. Quick update for those of you who didn't know. In March, we learned that instead of having another year and a half at Source, we had 6 months at Source. So we will be vacating our current residency at Source at the end of August. That is the end of our time there. So I want to give an overview of our search for space, which really predates this, let's call it a crisis. But all of the work that we've done around this question is only helping us now stay focused on what we need to do. So the vision for a WIT space has not changed. It's a dedicated home space for our main activities, for performances, for classes, and for training. It's where we want to do amazing things with one another on stage. We want to delight audiences. We want to connect with audiences. We want to have showcases. We want to have a space where we can teach, that a space that supports the activities that we have in our classes. We want a space where we can connect with the community around us, so that it's not just, adults taking improv classes, but we're able to connect to elementary school students or seniors, or who knows, any organizations and communities throughout the district that might want to come find improv with us. And then it's also a place where we want to be able to do our workplace training. Sometimes these clients want us to come to them. Sometimes they're looking for an experience where they would love to bring their team to us. So having a space that we could offer them that suits those needs would be tremendous. Way back when we zeroed in on this sort of space profile, outlining what we thought at that time were WIT's needs. So there was a main stage, a studio stage, green room space, obviously, classroom spaces, offices, conference room, a lobby with a cafe and a bar, audience seating, obviously, and restrooms. So interestingly, pretty much most of those needs were satisfied in a space that we won through an RFP process down in Southwest. The project was called the Waterfront Station 2, and this was the furthest we got in terms of our design. There was a bar and a lobby, and it came back to the main theater space here. There was a studio theater here. There was beautiful green room and rehearsal space back here, bathrooms for the public, and we were able to fit 2 sort of flex classrooms into the space. We had just gotten to sign a letter of intent on this space before the pandemic began. And the pandemic obviously put a big pause on construction citywide. And then at the end of that, when our developer was ready to sort of get things moving again, they proved fairly inflexible in terms of renegotiating anything around the deal. And so it would have meant us needing to launch a capital campaign over a year ago in the middle of what we didn't know how long this pandemic was going to be. And also the manner in which our landlord started to interact with us was also a little bit of a red flag. So thankfully, a letter of intent is not really a legally binding document. So we were able to walk away from that deal with a little bit more control over what we're able to do now with our finances. If we had signed that lease 2 years ago, we would have begun paying rent almost immediately. And the amount of money that we would have been paying now for what is not yet a built-out space would have been considerable. The other thing COVID taught us is that that old space, we don't really need a conference room, and we don't really need offices. We're all working remotely, fairly successful, and there are a lot of sort of shared office setups in the city, like WeWork, that we can use when we need to, if we want to convene as a team. So the idea of sinking money on real estate that's going to sit empty most of the time feels kind of very strange now. We also don't really think we need a studio stage. We think that WIT's main stage is where we can focus our energy for the foreseeable future. The idea of having a second space where we're actually programming against ourselves, splitting our audience into two tracks. It seems like we're having a challenge right now just building audiences back. So really giving people one thing to focus on at a time, we think is going to be a more successful path forward. And then the other thing you notice here is classrooms are circled. Losing those partnerships that we had with the venues where we were doing classes really showed us that we had a lot to gain from having a space where we control the space, where we're not susceptible to somebody else deciding like, oh, you know what, you're out now. It was really a shock to the system when we lost all of those partnerships at once. And so having at least some of our classroom space guided by more control on our end, more autonomy, is something that we're actively looking for now. This is just a snapshot of all the different places that we've been over the last 2-3 years. You may know some of these, some of you may know all of these organizations. This is laid out just to show you what is the activity that's taking place there. As you can see, Source and DC Arts Center are the only places where we've done all three core programming activities, which is classes, rehearsals, and shows. Some of these spaces we've only done one of those activities, some we've done two. It has proven helpful to have multiple relationships, because the one nice thing about that is that if one of them falls through or one of them becomes unavailable, well, you didn't have all of your eggs in that basket. We're continuing to explore new relationships with other organizations. And I want to talk a little bit about that approach. The multi-venue approach, the advantages that we have are that it is scalable, right? If there's another variant of COVID and everything gets shut down again, we can usually find a way to step back from these because they're usually rent per use agreements. So we're not on the hook for like a large monthly rental fee without exceptions. So our financial risk is minimized that way. It allows us to be in different neighborhoods, right? If we're in different places, we can be reaching different communities, which is nice. And we can also connect with those organizations and find different relationships with partners. The downside of the multi-venue approach is that we can't always control those spaces, right? Are there enough chairs? Are they the right size? Is the air conditioner working? Is there an air conditioner? Like these become trickier questions to work out. The schedule sometimes is out of our control. We're always somebody's second or third point of consideration. Partners can be inflexible. They may have their own crises, which make them an unstable partner in a venue. And then the more places that you're doing your programming, the easier it is for there to be confusion, right? And that's on both ends, right? Like, did we put in the right address in the email that we sent them for their first day of class? And then did they read that email and actually go to the place that we wrote? Or did they think, oh, well, I've been to a show, so my class must be at Source, right? A lot of assumptions get made by students or people who are taking a workshop for the first time. We regularly have people showing up at Source or wherever they last encountered a WIT programming. The other thing is that the programming remains silent, right? If I'm taking WIT classes at some offsite venue that's a church, well, that offsite venue that's a church is the only thing I'm going to experience. That is my relationship with Washington Improv Theater. I'm not going to be sort of adjacent to performance programming. I'm not going to see people walking into rehearsal. And then the administration of this kind of thing is burdensome, right? Each one of these involves a memorandum of understanding or a lease agreement, monthly payments, biweekly payments. It's just a lot to keep up with. The centralized venue approach, right? Having everything in one place gives us a lot more quality control. It gives us scheduling control. It just lets us manage the space in so many ways that can help benefit our programming, but it's not without some cons. Once we have everything under one roof, well, that one roof can only be in one neighborhood, right? So we're making it a little harder for people outside of that geographic range to find us. Having a space that we're fully managing is going to bring a lot of new expenses that we're not used to budgeting for or managing. Utilities, trash, concessions, real estate taxes, you name it. There's a big list here. And then the other risk is that it is a long-term financial commitment. Like I said, we sort of dodged a bullet by getting out of the space in Southwest. Well, this is potentially another bullet, right? As soon as we sign a lease that says like, yep, we're going to be paying you these thousands of dollars every month. Well, we need to be making sure we're bringing in that revenue. Otherwise, we're sort of jeopardizing the financial health of the organization. So that is to say, we have our preferences. We're exploring a lot of different ways to sort of crack this nut. We would like to find a space where we can unify as much of our programming as possible. We would like to find a long-term solution to this problem. We would like to remain in Ward 1, Ward 2 area because we have a 25-year legacy in this neighborhood. We would like to find a way to do ongoing programming rather than programming in fits and starts, bursts. And we'd like for all of our spaces to be accessible. By that, I mean wheelchair compliant, so that anybody with any sort of physical challenges can take an improv class without needing to navigate stairs, that kind of thing. Where we are right now is that we are exploring different options in all of these, an all-in-one venue, where we would have one central lease on the whole space, renting multiple venues for classes and performances. And then also another model that we're exploring is a residency model where another organization would sort of present us for possibly a year, a season, as their sort of artist in residence. The nice thing about that is it could buy us a little more time to conduct the more long-term space search in earnest. I've been on several site visits to look at spaces with our real estate broker and with people who are offering spaces. We've had several conversations with different venues around town about what their calendar looks like and when we might be able to lease or rent space. And we've had more than one conversation with a potential partner who could be sort of a presenter. None of these is confirmed yet. I cannot go into details on any of them. My fingers are crossed that one or possibly more of them will work out. And as soon as we have any confirmation of that, that news will be traveled far, will be shared far and wide. So that is the space update. I want to move on now to talking about anti-oppression and anti-racism at WIT. Just a reminder, I am sharing my screen, so I cannot see the chat right now. Dan, let me know if there's anything urgent popping up that I need to talk about.
You're good.
Okay. So what we're going to talk about in this update is the vision, values, and goals of WIT around anti-racism and anti-oppression work and some of the background and progress. All of this is this work, and really everything that WIT is doing is rooted in this belief that improv empowers people to build better lives, that improv has something to offer everybody, and everybody has something, in fact, to offer improv, that improv can bridge divides and build community, and that it unlocks creativity and agency in all of us, right? This probably is not shocking for anybody to hear, but like these are bedrock beliefs for us, and they connect to our values, which this list of values is something that the staff and the board helped sort of excavate. It had never been articulated before, but we started asking ourselves as part of an organizational process that we went through, like, what are the values that we have and how do they connect to our programming? And in fact, these values are what bear the work of WIT becoming an anti-racist organization. It isn't working against systemic racism, right, within our organization and within the larger culture, is not something that we build out as a side project. It's something that we realized when we looked deeper at our values, like it shows up here and it shows up here and it shows up here. And it's by being very intentional about manifesting these values in a deliberate way that we get to do that work. So these values of facilitating creative joy and self-discovery, centering humanity, building community, creating a welcoming and inclusive environment, building and fostering diversity at all levels, and valuing openness, transparency, and accountability. All of these are the path forward to arriving at a more anti-racist, anti-oppressive version of Washington Improv Theater. Ultimately, I think WIT, seeing that it needs to be a people-centered organization, was the first thing that sort of opened up the blossom of all of these other values, because what that means for us is that we have to care about everybody who's in the space, right? It isn't just the performers, it's the audience members. It isn't just the teachers, it's the students and the TAs. It is everybody who's with us having a good experience where they are feeling free and supported in their self-expression. And if not, then we stop, right? And we've got to address that, because that's the foundation for how I think any good community can operate, and certainly any good improv can happen. The other thing that's, I think, unique about WIT is that often we find that we're bringing people together who are from very different worlds, very different communities. People meet folks in their improv classes that they're like, I don't think I would have met her otherwise, right? Because so much of our lives we're living in our lanes, right? I've got my job, I've got the place where I live, and those are the people that I meet. Improv really does mix things up with people. We want to create a space where everyone can feel they belong and they can share as much of themselves as they're comfortable doing, without any fear of like judgment. Yeah, like I said, this whole deck is going to be shared, so I'm gonna stop reading each and every item here. But I think this item, which is straight from our strategic plan, sort of gets at the heart of what I'm trying to say, which is that we want to create inclusive and welcoming experiences that expand and diversify our community of engaged participants. That means welcoming is ultimately the spirit that we have to always have. We have to be able to meet people wherever they are, find a connection, and make them feel that they are welcome to engage with improv, with Washington Improv Theater. And if they're not, we need to be aware of it and address what's going on, what's the obstacle in the way. So these strategic pillars that you see are part of the actual strategic plan that we've come up with, which is, it's linked from the deck. And the nature of our strategic plan for the next 3 years is directional, which means it's showing us these are the ways that we're going. The plan itself does not yet articulate like these are the milestones you're going to do, and these are the benchmarks and the metrics that you're going to have. The staff is going to be working on that, but all of the plan is really aiming us at making sure that the nature of how we are doing everything is welcoming, is creating that atmosphere of support and belonging for everybody who's there. And that, everyone has a different personal experience with thinking about this. For some people that seems like, oh my God, like, isn't that already done pretty much? My improv classes always felt super welcoming. And then some people have had a very different experience and they're like, good luck, because I've had some real moments in improv classes where I definitely felt alienated or ostracized or judged and not welcome. And getting to a place where consistently everybody understands how crucial this is, that this is the bedrock, is a big part of the work that we have coming up in the years ahead. And it isn't work that necessarily you can enumerate and sort of like count how many successes you've had. It's really about changing the nature and the attitude of everybody in our space. It's crucial. Here's a little bit of a timeline for this work. We started being aware of diversity issues at WIT like more than 5 years ago. And I'll admit, like, I should have been aware of them even before they were brought to my attention, right? We had some community forums where we listened to people and tried to understand the problems. I think with each with each of those forums, with each of those convenings, with each time anybody was brave enough and giving enough to share their feedback on something that had happened to them, we grew a little bit better at listening, a little bit better at seeing what they were trying to show us. And then finally, we came to a sort of collective agreement that we needed to pivot and really focus on how the organization as a whole could move toward becoming a more anti-oppressive, anti-racist organization. And some of that vocabulary was new to some of us. We actually arrived at it through a consultancy that we did with Arrow, which is this abolishing racism in the workforce. It's really a project team that's part of Young Playwrights Theater. And they really helped us, I think, articulate what some of the problems were that had arisen in our community. They did a stakeholder survey, and they compiled a report based on that survey that they shared with staff and board. And then they helped us sort of map out the process forward and how to address the issues that had been brought up in the report, and how to make the culture of the organization itself stronger and more aware on these fronts, so that we could embed these values in our strategic plan and in the way that we do all of our stuff, right? Again, not creating a separate plan that we're like, okay, we did the anti-racist plan work, now we're done. It's really like looking at the way we do every single thing and making sure these values are embedded there. And that work has been very challenging. It shows up in places that you maybe don't expect it to. And we're looking forward to giving a more thorough, detailed update on this probably next month in July. That will sort of wrap up all the work that we've done on this front in this fiscal year. There's some links here to some key documents. When you get the deck, all of these links are active, so you can dive in a little deeper if this is of interest to you.
One quick thing I wanted to add is, if some of this stuff feels very high level, it is actually there are a lot of concrete steps that this is a one item of a lot of things we want to talk about tonight, but there are a lot of concrete things being taken. After our values statement was codified, we went through and everybody kind of looked at their work and said, like, okay, what are things that we need to change? We put it on a big spreadsheet with a timeline. We have meetings every other week, and we're like, how are we doing on this? How are we doing on that? Those deadlines change. Those people, everybody's supporting one another on different tasks. So there are a lot of concrete things that we are doing that are kind of under the hood, but this isn't all sort of like throwing the words around in Google Docs. There are actually a lot of concrete things that you may not notice unless you're like hacking into our emails.
Thank you, Dan. Thanks for clarifying that. Yeah. Okay, a little bit of a programming update. The 4 programs, shows, classes, community engagement, and WIT at work. Like I was just talking about, really from the values work that we've done, the strategic plan, all of that is focusing our energy on making sure how we do everything that we're doing has our values embedded in it. And when I talk about that, I'm talking about how we teach, how we coach, how we direct and rehearse, how we perform, how we relate to audience members, how we work in the WIT office or in our emails, how we pay people for their work, how we fundraise, how we advertise, how we message publicly about our programming, how we communicate with one another, and how we report out, whether that's to funders or to our community, or in an annual report, right, to the world at large. Those values sort of bleed into every aspect of our work. And so, like Dan just mentioned, like, we have a very thorough sort of work plan of like, okay, now we're going to look at this and work through how our processes, how our procedures, how our expectations maybe should be changed when we look at our values. The other priority we have in all 4 of these program areas is welcoming new people into our community. And I've mentioned that I think several times before, and I want to share one thing that we learned a few weeks ago. We were at a farewell seminar for a sort of professional development program that WIT has been a part of. We were part of a cohort of DC arts organizations getting some expertise and consulting from the Arts and Innovation Management Institute at University of Maryland, at the DeVos Institute. And Michael Kaiser, who is probably the most, he's the world's greatest expert on nonprofit arts organizations and managing them. And he talked to us about his big worry for the years ahead is that what organizations have truly been missing for the last 2 years during COVID is that constant influx of new people, right? New people attending your show, new people making a donation, new people taking your class or doing a training with you, right? A lot of that activity just stopped or drastically slowed down. And that influx of new people is those are the seeds of what is the garden of your family tomorrow, right? Like we all know folks who have left DC in the last 2 years, but we don't know as many people who have moved to DC and connected with Washington Improv Theater, right? It's been a strange time for people to connect to new arts organizations. So he believes that for the 2 years ahead, every arts organization really needs to be laser focused on bringing new people into connection with your programming. And we are taking that to heart. For us, that marries very handily with our priority of making sure that we're creating a welcoming space where people can feel like they belong. So we're doubling down on the energy of that. And when I talk about new people, I mean students, audience members, I mean performers and coaches and directors, certainly donors and community partners. I mean clients for our WIT at Work program. I mean board members, really everybody. We want more people to connect to this organization because that is our strength, is our community. Those are our two greatest priorities. I like to think of them all as basically a huge welcome to WIT campaign. And when we get into specifics in the classes area, we're talking about embedding these values of creating a welcoming space where people feel belonging in our teaching practices. There'll be more teaching training. There's actually going to be a curriculum revision that makes sure these values are centered. Formalizing the processes for onboarding TAs, building our faculty up, so that we can have the capacity to teach more level 1 classes and welcome new students into our family. And then the space goal connects with this, right? We need a sustainable space to have these classroom activities. Otherwise, we're not going to succeed. You can't create a welcome space if you don't have the space to begin with. In our shows, likewise, embedding those values of belonging and welcome atmosphere in all of our performance practices and rehearsal practices. Pulling in new audience members with programming that connects to their lives, that connects to some aspect of DC, some aspect of their personal or professional life that is interesting to them, or just connecting them to art that they find really exciting, right? The danger that we have is, I think, thinking that sort of business as usual is going to draw people in. And I think in that everyone has pulled back on how much they're engaging in public life, you have to be that much more exciting and really distracting to get people's eye and be like, oh, that's the show I want to go see. That's the thing that will drag me out of this couch and make me go out into the world again. So we all, I think, are going to need to step it up and find ways to make our programming as exciting as possible, and also make the messaging and marketing around it as exciting as possible. Welcoming new performers, and that's going to be new Herald team members, hopefully this summer. and also new performers onto our ensembles, which Dan already mentioned a little bit about. Supporting new voices as directors and coaches. That entire program of director series and launchpad shows is something that I'm aiming to relaunch, no pun intended, in the next few weeks. And again, the space connection is here. We need that space to present our performances, or else we really can't present, we can't create a welcoming atmosphere for audiences without the space. Community engagement, an interesting learning point for us has been like, we need to actually talk through our organizational values with a potential community partner. If we don't do that, we're creating too many opportunities for misunderstanding and misplaced expectations on both sides. So that's something that we're being very intentional about now going forward. Making sure that those values are embedded in how we facilitate those classes with community partners, and making sure that we're being mindful of the impact that we're creating as an organization in those spaces. We've advanced a deliberate strategy for pro bono work now, where we chose sectors that we wanted to focus on. This year, that is food security and housing, and we have proactively reached out to people running organizations in those arenas and just told them flat out, like, we would love to work with you and give you a workshop that we think could provide great team building, creativity for your people, whether that's your staff or your board or the constituents that you're serving. And there's been a really, really nice positive response from those organizations we've reached so far, which frankly, I'll say this feels like an easy win that we could have had so many years ago, and we just didn't quite put all the pieces together. So it's beautiful to see that happening now. And then the other thing that we're always trying to do is, when we get an inquiry from the community, we're trying to find ways to say yes to it, right? As long as it aligns with our values and our priorities in our strategic plan, like, let's find a way, right? This is more people who can connect with this craft, with these ideas, which we believe are for everybody, which we believe bring out the creativity and help create connection among everybody. And then the same thing is happening in WIT at work, right? We're making sure that the way we're facilitating, the way we're dealing with clients is aligned with our values. That deliberate strategy for pro bono work is here. You see, this is an area where WIT at work and our community engagement really bleed into the same thing, which is really a nice thing for us to have achieved, because previously there was really a siloed structure going on, and that wouldn't have happened. And finding these opportunities now has been a really exciting discovery in the organization. And then the other thing we're doing is flat out using sales and marketing techniques with a focus on, like, yes, let's get people to say yes. Earlier this calendar year, I think it was January and February, we literally like ran a special on 1 hour or 2 hour workshops. And a lot of people responded to that, right? By just navigating a certain price point, we were able to find organizations that were like, yes, I will sign up for that. And when those organizations become repeats, that'll be amazing. This upcoming year, starting July 1, is WIT's 25th anniversary, which I find astounding. And I'm super proud that this organization has grown into the amazing community that it is now. I would not have guessed that our 25th year would be somehow the year that we may have to start without knowing where we're going to do some of our programming. But that is the unpredictability of our lives right now. The other thing I would like to think about this upcoming year as is a year of welcome to WIT, right? That is, I think, the buzzword, that is the go-to term for the year ahead. And it's on all of us, I think, to do whatever we can to make every WIT experience as welcoming for everybody as possible. I don't want this to sound like Pollyanna. I actually want everyone to be aware that it is harder than you may think. The world is very divisive right now. People are in trauma or recovering from trauma. Everyone is struggling at some level. So it is not easy for everyone to lean into creating space for one another and giving support to one another. These are skills. They're skills that I think we learn especially well through improv, but we need to remind ourselves sometimes that they apply in the world as well. And so I'm asking everybody, I think, to be that sort of guardian of the atmosphere of WIT spaces and help make sure that everybody's feeling heard, and that if there's a conversation that needs to happen, it can happen, rather than somebody feeling alienated or sidelined. There were some questions that people sent in ahead of this, and so I want to give some answers to them, and then there will be time for live questions and answers as well. People asked, what's the future of WIT's education programming? And I think it's really about building back our organizational strength so that we can teach as much as we used to. It's about looking at our curriculum and our teaching practices and making sure our values are getting embedded in those things. It's, again, welcoming new people, doing whatever we can to bring new people into the craft of improv, because people really respond to it. They love it and they get a lot out of it. And again, it's that space question of finding a venue that gives us the stability that we want, so that we can build that program consistently. Question, when will WIT reinstate faculty meetings and communication to faculty? These are in the works. I spoke with Casey, our education manager, about this. The rhythm of meetings that she's looking at first will be meetings held between sessions, ideally in person, with everybody invited and the teachers who are teaching in the upcoming session expected to attend. She's working on those final dates and we'll be sharing them out as soon as she can lock in spaces. I imagine those meetings will also sometimes be hybrid, where they may be in person and also recorded and available virtually. Question, what does the Herald program look like after August? Boy, I wish I knew. I wish I knew what anything looked like after August. I'm confident that it will exist, but until we have a venue locked in, I can't really promise anything. We've been hesitant to launch any new auditions to create new teams for exactly that reason. I didn't want to ramp people up and give them exactly like 1 or 2 months of the Herald experience and then be like, sorry, we don't have a venue lined up for several months. With the teams that we have recreated, these are all players who were in the program before COVID started. So I think they get it. They've been through it once before. Like if worse comes to worse and we fall off a cliff at the end of August without a venue lined up, they will at least have had 3 solid months in the program, which they're adding on to the time that they had previously. We are very much hoping that these questions could be answered in the next weeks, certainly in the next month or two. But until they are, I can't promise anything. Question, what kinds of programming and extracurricular classes and workshops are in the pipeline? I'll say our main priority is the core classes program, just because that is really the spine on which all of the other programs are hanging. That's terrible. Let's cancel that metaphor for the recording. But you get it. Like we've got to have a strength in that core programming before the electives are going to succeed, before really the organization is back to its normal health. If you've got a crazy idea for a workshop that you want to do, that's like an extracurricular class, like Casey's all ears. She'd love to hear it, but she's not spending a lot of her energy right now on outreach to make that happen. If you think about it, those classes are often under enrolled. The more specialized you get, the fewer people in the player community probably are going to be that into your thing. So we're really trying to make sure that our core program is robust. That way, the overall population of students is larger. And then down the road, those specialty workshop classes are going to succeed more. Aside from community jams, what other community engagement events, et cetera, is WIT planning on offering? Obviously, Improvapalooza is coming up. I think we're trying to plan a picnic before Improvapalooza. Details on that probably forthcoming in the next couple of weeks. I think some of the options that we're looking at in terms of next year's performance schedule may give us the opportunity to have special community focused blocks in that calendar, which is a sort of exciting new way to think about that programming. I'm all ears. If you have ideas for something that you want to do, I'm happy to help facilitate that. But also, you don't have to ask me or anybody like at WIT HQ if you want to convene people to do something. Like if you want to throw a picnic with a bunch of WIT people, like absolutely do it. There's no like I think WIT is never intending to be proprietary about like, no, people may only convene when it's an official WIT function. Like if you want to form a movie group of WIT people who go to movies together, like that sounds awesome. Whatever it is, like do it. Or if you feel like we could help get it done, reach out to me. And I'm happy to try and help. Question, can WIT provide more regular updates to the community / improve communication? Yeah, this hits both ways. I get it. Whoever wrote this wants more communication. Some people tell us they want less. We try to be mindful that like whenever we actually have something to announce, make sure it gets shared out. I think if ever you have questions about a certain thing, feel free to reach out to me and be like, hey, is there any update on this? And I will happily answer. That said, I think transparency is one of the values that really came up a lot when we had our values conversation. And I think we are looking at ways to make sure that we are sharing out more of the decision making. I think it's going to take a little practice for us organizationally. And I will share that, frankly, our staff is sometimes working at capacity, just like, getting the donuts made, if you will, doing the core programming activity that has urgent deadlines. So sometimes the sort of like softer community updates can fall by the wayside. I think maybe it's something Dan and I can talk about to see if there's a certain cadence of updates that might be nice to just sort of set in the calendar so that we could hold ourselves to that. And that was the end of the questions that were submitted in advance. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Come back. Hi, Dan. Are there other questions that have popped up?
There have been. We've answered them in the Q&A section.
Snazzy.
That I don't think I went too rogue in answering anything. But yeah, I will say that if you think of something, we reopened the Google form that is linked to in the news item that you used to register for this event. So go ahead if you want to submit think of something, submit another question. You can also email us. But if you do the form, it'll get to everybody. Is Elizabeth Cutler asks, is there anything else that we can do to support the venue space process, like regular people, not people who secretly own theaters?
Thank you. That is an awesome question. I think right now there is not. If that changes, I will reach out to this sort of community of nears and dears, performers and teachers, essentially, to ask for help. Thank you.
So I think that's it. And so I'll say this isn't scripted, but also I'm not trying to like kiss my boss's ass, but shout out to Mark for this has been he hates this stuff when people do this, but it's been a really tough couple of years, and it's been tough for everybody to like weather all this. And so we're very thankful to have Mark at the helm. And so it's we're a team of 5. We're all doing the best we can, and I think we're very happy that we're still here, and I think we're on the upswing.
That is very kind. It is definitely a team effort, and although on the org chart it may say Mark was at the helm, there have definitely been many, many moments when Dan Miller himself was at the helm and Mark was just sort of sobbing below deck, being like, I can't do it. I cannot. So thank you, Dan, for making it possible for all of us to get here.
All right. See you at Herald Night.
Yes. See you all soon. Bye.